Everybody, it's Mark Spess, and let's see, today is June 27th, 2012. And so tonight we have a guest on. His name is Anthony Scott, and he's on the line now. And Anthony has a site called stopmotionanimation.com, and his site was created in 1999. So it's been around for a long time, so most of you people out there probably already know who he is. But for those who don't, Anthony's been an animator for many, many years, and he's got an About section on his page. And just to kind of give you guys a little heads up on what he's done, he says, when I was a kid, I was intrigued with the puppet animation featured in the Rankin and Bass holiday specials, such as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Simultaneously, I was amazed by Ray Harryhausen's creature films, my favorite being The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. So he's had a lot of inspirations as a kid, like most of us. And he says, however, it was the 1933 RKO film King Kong that ultimately hooked me. Scavenging the libraries, I searched for books on the subject of stop-motion animation, but there wasn't much to be found. By the way, I was 11 years old. I had managed to animate my first stop-motion film using a simple Super 8 movie film camera. Today I worked in the film industry and am always learning more about this unique and unusual art form. Stop motion animation was launched in April 1999, and since then it has become a popular meeting place for aspiring animators. If you're visiting for the first time, take a look around at the new site design featuring a dedicated page for each member, blogging, photos, and video upload, a chat room, and even an events page, all while retaining the ever-popular message boards. So Anthony, thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone out there.
So you got a lot of viewers today, and I know that a lot of you guys out there are going to want to ask lots of questions. Now keep in mind, if you guys ask a lot of questions at once, he probably can't answer them. But we did have two particular questions that were submitted on our page, and I do want to talk about that. Ron Cole asked two questions. The first being, he says, in your experience as a professional animator, how frequently, if at all, do you and or other animators you work with use surface gauges? And he says the reason I ask is because in all the behind-the-scenes videos I have seen, I have never seen anyone working with them, but for me they are a staple part of the job. And he also asked, do people at Leica really only shoot with a frame grabber? So he wants to know, how many people that do they use surface gauges?
Well, I definitely use surface gauges. I learned how to do stop motion, using a surface gauge. And I always saw, in those old issues of Cinemagic or Starlog, Ray Harryhausen or Dave Allen with a surface gauge. Didn't know what it was, didn't know how to use it, but that eventually I learned how to use it, and I still use it. I do know a lot of the newer animators today. They learn without a surface gauge. I had to. There were no frame grabbers when I started doing this, but the thing is, I still use it now because if you're animating a character and they're walking slowly towards the camera, you're going to have a really hard time animating that without a surface gauge, I think. I just find it really helpful to gauge the top of the head, and it's my favorite tool in the toolbox right now.
Great. So do you have lots of surface gauges, like ones that you created, or do you just have like one that you love?
I have a variety of surface gauges I've had. I got two when I was working on the Gumby show, a small one and a larger one. And I've modified them. I've added extra arms. I've used bits of wire sometimes too. I'm just gauging a tail or a foot. Use a piece of blue tack with a toothpick. I just make whatever I need to, depending on, how many parts the puppet has.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Skellington had a lot of pieces of cloth hanging off his costume, in The Nightmare Before Christmas after he was shot down, and I had, I don't know, it was like 20 of these little pieces, moving around all the time, and the puppet. So I had to keep track of things. I didn't gauge every single piece, but I definitely relied on a surface gauge for that quite a bit. And a piece of wire, anything I could find to keep track of things. And that was back in the day when, surface frame grabber consisted of 2 grabbed frames and 1 live frame.
Yeah, so you, when frame grabbers sort of first came on the market, did you, what was your impression of that? Like, did it make life a lot easier as an animator?
Oh, yeah. They just keep getting better, too. When I was animating, even on Nightmare Before Christmas, that was a huge step to have a grabber that, enabled us just to see what we did, to go back and see just a couple of frames. But I still, dreaded dailies, because you'd work on a shot for 2 weeks, and they would project it in front of everyone, and, your stomach would still, get tied up in knots. Anticipation that, what's going to happen, because you really couldn't see, what if something happened with the camera? What if the lab, messed up the shot? You don't know, you didn't know back then. Now you can see, and you can cut back while you're shooting. It's amazing, the digital tools that are out there right now for animators.
Sure. So do you think that, with all this new technology like Dragon Frame and Stop Motion Pro and all these high-end frame grabbers, does it make the lives of the producers easier, because the relationship between the animator and maybe the director or the producer, they can see things instantly? Does it sort of take the pressure off of you guys as animators?
It allows for it's changed a couple of things. Before, when we were shooting on film, the dailies would be once a day in the morning, and the rushes, whatever. Now they could be at any point during the day. So the director has to be called away from whatever they're doing, and they need to get into editorial, see the shot, cut it in, make sure they like it, get the animator launched on another shot. So that's happening all day long now, instead of in the morning. What else? It's also, set visits are possible now. The director can visit each animator if they're on a shot that's taking, 5 or 6 days to shoot. The director can visit them, at the end of the second or third day to see if it's going well, and if it's not what they want, ask the animator to cut back, restart if necessary. So that's pretty helpful in a lot of ways.
Okay. So does anybody else have any questions? Ron, I guess you're here. Do you have any more questions about surface gauges at all? I know Tom Smith, who I met in John Lemon Films, he made gauges by just taking a piece of clay, a complete block, a 1-pound block, and sticking some lead wire in there. And on the tip of the wire, he would take smaller gauge wire and just, wrap it around there and make a point. And that's one of the first ways I did it.
Yeah, I mean, whatever works. I've gotten pretty creative when needed. I really like these Starrett surface gauges, though. They're pretty nice. So I've got a small collection of those.
Sure. Now, one of your co-workers from Nightmare, and I can't remember his name, but he worked for the Kyoto Brothers, and they had a Movie Magic interview with him and the Kyoto Brothers, and I remember having this conversation with one of my other friends. He took blue tack, and he put his Starrett gauge on the table, and literally took blue tack and stuck it down. Do you have any technique that you use like that to stick your gauges down?
Oh, I see. Just so it wouldn't slip around.
Yeah.
On the set. Yeah, some of the sets are slipperier than others. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I don't want to scratch the set, so I'll put, those things you can buy at Home Depot, those little, felt discs that you can have adhesive on one side. Mm-hmm. I've done that, and that, it doesn't really mar the surface or scratch the surface, and you got to be careful of that sometimes. Another time, working on James and the Giant Peach, I had a lot of shots of the characters on the top of the peach. And how do you put a gauge on that? Because it's the way they made the surface is sort of like a felt, spongy, with some sponge in between fiberglass, so that when they kind of tie them down, their foot would actually press into, you know, the surface.
Sure.
So putting a gauge down, I was afraid I was going to, it would fall off, one thing, because it was a big, dome. So I just put 4 little pins on the base, and that held it in place and enabled me to put it anywhere on top of the peach without it messing up the fabric surface, and it also kept it from falling off.
Oh, okay, interesting. Now, Paul is asking, what is the largest number of gauges you used, and what was the shot?
Largest number of gauges. Well, I think, I'm not quite sure, but I have to. I'm thinking it might be Jack Skellington in the Graveyard, just because I had all those pieces of cloth, and I had to gauge each arm as well as his head, and depending on what he was doing, just to kind of keep track of all that. But I don't know if that's really right. I mean, I tend to use one gauge and kind of move it around and use it without puppets. If I got 8 puppets, I'll use the same gauge. I'll just do one puppet at a time. And I tend to put I usually gauge from the head first.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a human type puppet, I'll just put a tiny bug pin, very small pin, thin pin, into the character's head, and gauge off the tip of the pin. Usually a character has fabric or hair that you can stick this pin in and then pull it out at every frame. I just do that just to kind of protect the puppet, keep it from getting damaged by the pointy end of the surface gauge.
Okay. And so Paul wanted to know again, what was the shot, and Anthony had said that it was the poor Jack shots in the graveyard. He thinks, but he can't really remember.
Yeah, I only mention that because that character, his costume just had so many parts, and I was using gauges to help me with that. And I didn't have the kind of frame grabbing system that people have, like Dragon Frame today. You couldn't play back your shot. I really had to be careful and gauge everything.
So if you were going to animate that same shot today with like Dragon Frame, the frame grabber, would you do it pretty much the same way?
That's a good question. I would definitely use a gauge. I probably wouldn't need as many gauges, though.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have to gauge all those pieces.
Yeah. And
he had very, he's a really skinny puppet. Everybody knows his design. Very long arms, and his arms were outstretched a lot in that sequence, and those pieces of fabric were just hanging there. And not only that, he was on top of that angel statue. So I had my surface gauge attached to a C-stand arm that I would take in and out every frame. And I had to climb up on the set and animate him on top of that. Yeah, exactly that picture. The gauge is actually attached to a C-stand arm, and all those little pointers there. I probably was gauging his head, his hands, and then using smaller gauges out of wire to gauge the clothes.
Wow, that's amazing. And how long, from what I've read, that shot took, about 6 months to animate?
That entire sequence, I don't remember how long it is. It's that entire song. And I did most of the animation. I did all of the Jack Skellington animation, some of the Zero animation. Richard Zimmerman animated some other Zero shots that were added, some cutaways. But my part on that sequence was 6 months. Wow.
So when you completed your animation, did you feel relieved, or how did you feel after? It's so tedious to do that.
Well, I have to say that is one of my most favorite experiences. It was my first feature film, when I read the script, that was the sequence I was drawn to, and I asked Henry Selick and Eric Layton both, is there any way I can animate that sequence? I really felt drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the emotion. I liked what was going on in that part of the film,
Mm-hmm.
where Jack was realizing what he was basically changing direction. He was going to give up the whole Christmas thing, and he realized who he was, and he was going to go make things right. And I just thought that was a really powerful point in the film. So I asked if I could do it.
Sure.
I pretty much enjoyed the whole experience, and I put my heart into it. I really, the music, everything. And, Tim Burton didn't visit very often, but he did come in once while I was working on a sequence, and he came in just to tell me how much he appreciated what I was doing and how much character I was giving to Jack, despite the fact that he didn't have any pupils. His eyes were just empty holes, sockets in his head. So, I was I was blown away by that. I'm working on my first feature film. Tim Burton's coming in, talking to me. He rarely made any appearances on that film.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he was pretty much handed it over to Henry Selick, I guess, to handle most of it?
Yeah, Henry was there day to day. He directed the animation, and he directed the whole film. I never got any notes from Tim. And I don't know how often he actually met with Henry, but I do know that Tim was directing Batman Returns at the time. And I think he was working on it, Ed Wood around the same time as well.
Yeah, so he was probably pretty busy.
Yeah, and we were shooting up in San Francisco, so I don't know where Tim was, but I only saw him a couple of times there in the 2 years I was on that project.
Wow, that must have been exciting. Now, Ron is asking, he says, when you're watching your own animation, do you see the flaws like I do? Meaning his own animation. He says, my animation never looks as good to me until a lot of time has passed.
Yeah, that's pretty, I feel the same way. It's like, over time, I begin to accept it. But, sometimes I nail it. It looks good, and I can accept it right away. And sometimes, for whatever reason, the puppet breaks. I work all night, and I'm really tired and exhausted, and, there's a billion reasons why, but, it's extremely unforgiving, this medium. So, yeah, there's shots still today that I do, like, man, I wish I could redo that shot. I know I could nail it.
Sure.
And then, a year or two goes by, and you don't think about it as much. I think it took me longer to accept the flaws in Nightmare, just because I was so close to that. And I was a lot younger, too, when I learned a lot working on that film.
Okay, well, there was one question I wanted to ask, because you just brought up being younger. And then Paul also has a question, but let me get this one out of the way first. Was there ever like an aha moment when you were just starting out that things just sort of clicked for you, like something that maybe you learned in a book or an animator told you a technique or something that made your animation a lot better from then on?
I was really lucky. My first job was working on the Gumby TV show, and I worked with Eric Layton, Mike Belzer, Trey Thomas, all these guys a lot of these guys I still work with today. And we were all kids, basically, and we were learning constantly from each other. And I recommend getting a job on a TV show if you can, if there's one available, Robot Chicken, whatever you can find, because you learn very quickly on a show like that. You have to crank out the animation. Mm-hmm. And I was constantly learning. My animation was awful when I started on Gumby, and I had a little bit of experience doing my own things, but that was my first job, my first paid position in the film business. But yeah, we were all, I just remember, back in those days we shot on film, and, go to editorial and put it on the flatbed and scroll through and see how how a certain shot was done, how another animator done it. Like, how many frames is that? Always analyzing. It's good, and this art form, I'm always learning. It's always a challenge. But an aha moment, I don't think I had anything that big. It was mostly just constant study, right? I guess.
Yeah. Okay. And Paul asks, what made you want to start up your website in 1999, stopmotionanimation.com? What was the reason?
Well, there were two things. I was working at Pixar at the time, and I was there about 2.5 years, and I was really missing stop motion. At the same time, I had a friend that had the Halloween Town website, Jeff Rizzo. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, he passed away, I guess.
Yes, but he was a good friend of mine, and we became friends because of that website. And I told him, hey, maybe I should start a stop motion website, and he encouraged me to do that.
Oh.
And so I set that whole thing up and bought the name, and I don't know what I had. At the very beginning, it was a very simple message board. But the idea was always to create a place for people to meet and to exchange ideas and to encourage one another. And it's really taken off.
Sure.
It's great when I meet somebody who tells me that they thank me for the website and that they learned this or they learned that or they got a job because of it, or things like that. It really makes me happy.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I still miss that old site. It was a lot of fun. Wasn't it, I think, HalloweenTown.com or Jeff's
Halloween
site?
Town, yeah.
Yeah, that was so popular and everybody loved that site, and it was really sad when he stopped making posts. Everybody was like, what happened? But
yeah, I got a good story about Jeff, real quick. He flew out, and he was able to meet Henry Selick when we were working on, I think it was James and the Giant Peach. I was able to arrange, him to meet with Henry, and he was thrilled. So it was great.
that's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Let me see here. So Ron asked another question earlier up in the chat here. He says, Anthony, how frequently do you have trouble because the limitations or breakages with the puppets? So how often do you have problems, with that?
Okay, limitations. You must mean like limitations of the armature or the armature coming up against the silicone or the costume or whatever. Typically I work on these big films where there's an entire team of people you can take your puppet to, even in the middle of a shot, and say, the puppet's leg just broke, fix, and then you reposition and keep going. The limitation issue is something that needs to be figured out in the design and testing phase, just to make sure you can get all the poses that you want and that you need. It's always important that a puppet is able to, human, is able to touch the top of their head or touch their face without looking really strange. Sometimes the arms are too long and the hands can't curl it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
What kind of limitations you come up with. So it's always good to take your puppets when you're starting your film and get them into all these different poses before you commit to making duplicates, or that's just part of the testing phase. I had to on James the Giant Peach, the spider had some limitations with the legs, and I was testing it, and I had to tell Paul Berry and Tom Sanmon, who, Tom Sanmon's been in the business for years and years. He's a really great guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to say, Tom, this isn't working. And he had to go in and create extra joints for the legs just so they wouldn't get caught up. What was happening, they were breaking when I was making the character walk. So that came about in the testing phase.
Oh, that's interesting. And Metal Mad Cat asks, are you currently on any personal project? He says, silly question if you already talked about that, or else if you have said or written this anywhere. So he's wondering, what are you up to nowadays?
Personal projects, yeah. I have ideas for films, and I have, myself, I have not made my own film since I was a kid. And so it's always in the back of my mind, how am I going to get something started, and when I do, then I get busy on something else. So I do have a project of it. I pull out every once in a while. I have armatures, I have storyboards, I look at it, I hate it sometimes, it changes. But I have not shot anything yet, so there's that. But I'm also leaning towards shooting some experimental stuff. I'm in a down period right now where I'm not working on anything. I was just, I'd like to spend that time testing things.
Sure.
Experimental type things.
So do you have like your own camera that you use, and maybe a garage that you have set up as your own personal studio?
I have a very small space in a house. It's not like even a garage, but it's just enough. A small 2-foot by 4-foot table that I use for testing. And that's all I need at this point. But if I did work on my own film, I'd want a bigger space for sure, just so I could, have the freedom to store. If there's multiple sets, you just need a lot of room. You need a lot of room to paint and tear the set walls apart and store things. And
sure.
Motion control if you have the budget for that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like most of us, so that's nice to hear in a way. Now, let me see here. There's a lot of questions. So, Martin's asking, how long do your puppets usually last? And that, could be, I guess, any film. Let's say foam latex. How long would a puppet usually last if you animate that on shots? Is it something that will hold up pretty well?
I wish I had a puppet person with me right now, because I usually animate the puppet and then I return it and they go through and clean it up for the next shot. So I don't really know. I think typically the casting on the body will last. I know the hands, every once in a while, they just need to be replaced. They're usually silicone with the wires that they poke out after a while. Mm-hmm. And they can definitely touch those up, but after a while they just look bad and they just replace them. But I would think hands are the biggest part of a puppet that needs to be replaced.
Okay. Now, Peter he says he has a really massive question, but my page won't let him post it. Let's see if he posted it down the line here. Well, if you want to just, okay, you wrote an email. I don't know why it won't work for you guys. Maybe it's too long. Okay, let me see if I can find it in my email real quick. Oh, yes. While I'm doing that, you sent me this picture.
Oh yeah.
It's of silhouettes of all kinds of cartoon characters. And so, what was the reason for that? I didn't
really know what we were going to talk about today. There was talk about critiquing films and animation, and I was up for whatever you want to talk about. But I did find this today actually on Facebook. Somebody posted it, and I thought, this is kind of neat because it's showing. I can pretty much identify most of these characters on here. Their poses are really strong. They're not neutral. But we're just looking at silhouettes here. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that part of stop motion animator training is to come up with poses for each character. If you get a job on a film, you need to come up with different signature poses that emphasize the character's personality, and that's what these do pretty well right here. And I think that one of the first things anybody should do out there that's making their own film, just do a little photo shoot with your characters. Find out what poses look really great and read really well with your puppet's design. And then when you want to take it into the animation stage, pick your 2 favorite poses and animate a little transition between those poses. A little weight shift into that pose. And that's a really good thing to just kind of get an idea of how you're going to get, reach those kinds of poses, because stop motion animator has got to plan out where they're going to have their puppet be throughout the shot, and it's really helpful. What we do on a feature is shoot a little block test, and you put just the key poses in. If we get those approved by the director, then we can go for the shot usually. But just as an exercise, go grab your puppet, do a little photo shoot. Shoot about, I don't know how many poses, a dozen or so, maybe more, and find the ones that read really well.
Yeah, and these are, you can sort of tell their attitudes by their poses, and I never really thought to do that. It's really smart. I know some of the James and the Giant Peach work that you guys did. I noticed that the Centipede had a really strong character, very sort of confrontational, rough and gruff kind of character. When you have something with that many arms, is it hard to find a pose that would be show his character? Is it hard to is it harder to animate something with that many arms, in your opinion?
I think the Centipede, his arms were very short, so it was hard to really get them to read. He wasn't your typical character. He's basically a stick with this giant head and these tiny arms, and a lot of times they would just kind of mimic each other or overlap in some way. But and tiny hands. So if he had to point or do anything with his hands, you better hope it's a close-up.
Yeah.
But yeah, depending on the design, each puppet has its own challenges when you're trying to get certain poses to read.
Sure. Well, let's see what else people are talking about here. Leo Lionel is asking, Anthony, do you still live in the San Francisco Bay Area? Obviously, when projects come along, you do traveling. So, do you have to travel around a lot for jobs?
Yeah, it seems to me that the last 10 years I haven't really had a real home. I've moved around. I've lived in San Francisco and Southern California, London, Portland, and right now I'm still up in the Northwest. So, but you never know. I never know. I was just down in Ojai working with Jamie Cleary on a Shins video back in March, like the week after I finished Paranorman.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of hiding out right now, which it was great because it gave me time to work on my website, which is something that's been on my mind for years, is to update it.
Yeah. Well, I do have another question. And this is kind of a technical question. I always kind of wondered about this because, sometimes when you're animating a shot, it takes a certain number of frames or a certain amount of time to convey a point. So whenever a film is about to start, you have a storyboard artist who will make the whole film usually in storyboard, and then they'll do the voices and so forth, and they'll kind of space the shots and time the shots out. Do they ever consult with the animators about how long a shot should be? And have you ever run into a problem where a storyboard artist will make a shot or a scene that's really, really short or really, really long, and you realize that the timing just doesn't work in that space of time? I mean, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that happens all the time. Storyboard artists, they just kind of rough it in. They do the drawings, then the editor times out the drawings, and the shot can either, when you're really going over the shot with the director, the shot can grow,
mm-hmm.
and then the film grows in length, and they have to cut some of it out. But yeah, I think it's just used as a guide, not as something you have to. They try to, if they want it 43 frames, you try to make it happen in 43 frames. But if you need more time, you ask for it. The other thing storyboard artists do is you see all kinds of different styles and of drawing, and you see the character drawn, fitting into this little car and grabbing the steering wheel. But when you actually get the puppet in there, it doesn't fit, and the arms can't reach the steering wheel. So it's always funny when you say, "Yeah, it'd be great if my puppet could do what the storyboard character could do."
Yeah. So, I mean, do you sometimes have to go to the prop makers and have them change the length of the shaft coming off the steering wheel, or something along those lines to fix that, or?
Yeah, sometimes, hopefully that stuff is taken care of ahead of time, that it's been tested ahead of time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen, extra long arms on the character. They're just, subtly longer, but depending on what they need to do. I think the Centipede, for instance, had some extra long arms for the, on his top arms. But he just could not grab the top of his head, for instance. He had that hat. I think there was a shot where he had to readjust his hat or something. I don't remember. He had the cigar for sure.
Yeah.
So sometimes they make special. Let me think. I've worked on shows where the character's knees, like the character has to sit on their knees, and it just doesn't. The joints don't bend that way, so they have to create special knees or legs that will do that.
Wow. Well, let's see now. Let's see. Nick says, let's see. So you guys have any more? Okay. Peter says, I wanted to know about gauges being a must. I don't use them, he says, and I find that puppets look better with some error in their motion. He says, take Planet of the Dinosaurs. Lovely animation, but too regular, he says. So that's his taste is more, he likes rougher animation. So are there any times that you feel that you would appreciate a rougher motion in a character?
Well, I think everyone has their own preference for one thing. I've tried to animate without gauges, and I just don't like it, because I just like to know where the character is in real space. Once you move that thing, you don't know where it was, especially if it's coming towards the camera. If it's a profile shot, yeah, you can use your video grabber, and it's pretty good. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
But that's how I prefer to work.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the same way. It looks like most of the people are questioning Peter's sanity. He says, Leo says, Peter, you still don't use a frame grabber?
Yeah, I don't use a gauge for everything. It depends on. It really does depend on what the puppet is doing, and I'm trying to think of times I didn't, but smaller characters, maybe I don't need a gauge. But something that's very tall and walking on two legs, yeah, a puppet that's 17 inches tall, it's going to go everywhere on those tiny little ankle joints.
Yeah.
So it just helps me to keep it, and a lot of the animation, the shows I work on tend to be, they try to go for a naturalistic, smooth motion.
Sure. Yep, I feel the same way too. That's my preference. So let me see here. Okay, well, I guess we have about a little bit under 20 minutes. And I know that Randy, we talked about this earlier, Anthony and I, about looking at some videos and just sort of turning it on its head. And what I want to do for these videos, and since Randy is here and can ask questions, is we're going to watch this video called Fast Food that Randy created. And it's about 2.5, almost 3 minutes long. It's a short film. And it was made in 1999 by Randy Boyum. And so what I'd like to do is we're going to watch this, and then after we watch it, Randy, if you'd like to ask Anthony some questions about their video, like what questions you might ask for, maybe you want to know if you can improve or something similar. So that's what we're going to give a try now, and hopefully this plays. Looks like it didn't load. I'm hoping as I play this that it'll go all the way up, but let's see what happens here. Maybe what I'll do is I'll refresh it just so it won't get stuck halfway. Alright, let's try it here. And I'm gonna wait for it to load up. If it wants to. So Anthony, do you have a YouTube page, don't you? A YouTube channel?
Yeah, I do. It's not really something I'm keeping up very well, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it's an advantage to use YouTube nowadays, or do you sort of like to just let your demo reel speak for you, or like what's your how do you get people to learn about you on the internet besides your main website? Or do you have even a need for that? Like, do you ever marketing
What's the
yourself?
question?
Like, how do you market yourself out there? How do you get yourself out there?
Well, I have my website out there. I have anthonyscott.net, which is just my stuff. And then I've got the stopmotionanimation.com site. That, every once in a while I get interest from different people. There was a music video I worked on 2 years ago that it was a lot of fun to do because I shot it where I was living in my house. And that was a result of meeting somebody on the site.
Oh, okay.
It's not out yet, though. It's coming out very soon.
Wow, that sounds fun. Is that Jamie's project? Or was this a different one?
No, it's a artist named Kishibashi, and I shot it. It's about 2 years ago now, little over 2 years. 2 years ago. It's all paper animation. His wife did all the artwork over on the East Coast, sent it over to me, and then I would shoot the stuff and send it to them, and they'd look at it. And it's just taken some time to get it all worked out.
Okay, very cool. Well, I am going to try to play this video, and hopefully once the little button goes to the end here at 50 seconds, it will still work. But if not, we'll probably just cut this short, because I think the bandwidth on my computer is kind of being taxed to its limits. But we're going to play this, and I'm going to mute the microphone here, and let's take a watch.
A double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink, please. Did you get my order? A double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink. No, I want a cheeseburger, a double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink. A cheeseburger. Listen to me! Shut up! A double cheeseburger! Say it! Double cheeseburger! Double cheeseburger! Right! Onion rings! Say it! Onion rings! Onion rings! And a large orange drink! Large orange drink! Drink! Say it! Drink! I want a double cheeseburger, onion ring, and a large orange drink! Ah!
It's a very funny film, and so the question, basically, what would you want to ask Anthony? First off, what's your opinion of the piece, Anthony? Just
it's just hilarious. We've all been there in the drive-through. This is exaggerated, of course, but it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And, anyway, it made me laugh a lot.
Orange.
Yeah, it's really hilarious. So, oh, okay. So Randy just says, I would just love to hear anything he has to say. So you didn't have any specific questions, I guess? And Nick says, it's the funniest film I've seen for ages. And James says, I thought he was going to drive to the window and have the person talking the same way.
Yeah, that would be funny. How long did it take Randy to shoot this?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. Randy says that he loved doing it, and it took 6 weeks. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, the voices are great. I mean, it's always fun to have a character that's got a great vocal performance.
Yeah. I think his expressions are really good too. You can tell he's really annoyed, and just all the poses really work well. And so Paul is asking Randy. He says, what was the voice recording session like? Did the voice come first or the animation? And Randy says it was produced by Ron Steven and Joy Gridnick. Yeah, just my personal opinion. I think it's really good. I think that you could always make the puppets more intricate and the sets and light it, with better lights and everything. But I think just as it is by itself, it gets the point across, which is, I think, the most important thing, and it just does it really well. So that's my opinion. And Randy says it was for their radio show in the 1960s. Oh, okay. So it was like a radio show voice track. And
so it's recorded in the 60s, and they got the rights. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, really awesome.
Yeah, for some reason, a lot of stop motion films are really dark. It's always refreshing to see something that goes for comedy. And I have this friend, Tim Hiddle, that makes these really amazing films out of clay. Really simple, character. But his advice to me was make it funny. And this film definitely was funny. Was definitely involved and waiting to see what was going to happen. It escalated to the point where he decided just going to destroy the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're talking about The Potato Hunter, maybe?
Yeah, Potato Hunter, Canhead, and then his latest one is The Quiet Life.
Yeah, his animation is amazing. I remember seeing his films years ago. I guess this one is from 1991, it says. Some of the animation is just astounding, and just the emotion and the weight that he can give a character, even though it's made from clay, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I do have one question. Let me see here. Well, Ron has another one here. He says, Anthony, would you like to work on a Harryhausen Tippett style realistic animation film like Dragon Slayer, RoboCop, or Sinbad?
I'd be up for it. Yeah, it'd be fun to work at Tippett doing some stop motion. I know they're doing Mad God on the side, and I worked at Tippett on Evolution back in 2000, I think. So I got to get some Tippett direction, creature stuff. But it would be fun to do some stop motion there. Yeah,
sure.
I remember asking him about Dragon Slayer, and I guess just the go motion is not a lot of fun to work with.
Really? Is that what you've heard?
Yeah, just the characters, the puppets connected to all these rods, and to create the blur, it has to move. So I don't really know all these. I've never used go motion, and I think it's cool. I remember the first time I saw Dragon Slayer, I was completely amazed and doing a double take. Like, is that what? Is that real? What?
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. And Ron is saying that you don't really need go motion anymore, just digitally blur the frames.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. But I think Tippett still likes Go Motion. I think he's still kind of holding on to that. He made a past comment to me about that on his Facebook page when I mentioned digital blurring, and you can tell he's like, yeah, but there's still Go Motion. Like, oh well, that's true. I won't question you.
He's trying to shoot Mad God with all these older techniques, right? Front screen, rear screen projection.
Yeah, that's how it seems. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We did a lot of that stuff on Nightmare, and a lot of the stuff was in camera or backwinding the film, re-exposing the fog pass. Shots got ruined because of that. Not very often, but every once in a while. It's a lot easier now. I think people sleep better now.
Yeah. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, so I am not going to show any more videos, guys, because it's too short. But Paul says, Anthony, we are working towards some big features with stop-motion creatures. You are welcome to help. I think he's talking
cool.
about Sinbad. And Metal Mad Cat says, oh, you wanted to watch the Canhead? You wanted to... Was it Canhead that I had up there? Yeah, if you just do a search for Tim Hiddle. Is that what you're talking about? I think they're talking about Tim Hiddle. Canhead. Yeah, just do a search for that on YouTube, guys. It's not that long, but it's longer than we have time for. Let's say if a character were to walk and his foot were to start from the first position and move to the second, how would you plan it in your mind? How to space it out?
Yeah, well, I think the characters walk usually, 2 steps or about a second, 12 frames per stride, typically. But, really I use myself to time things out all the time, just to get my timings and transfer those to my notes.
Sure.
If something's more mechanical, I'll probably just get on the set itself and measure it out and put down tick marks on tape, things like that. If it's a walk, I know that, okay, the character needs to travel 3.5 inches every 12 frames, so I can kind of get an idea where the character, how long it's going to take for the character to get across the set, for instance.
Sure.
I don't really make too many notes. I need to know where the character is going to be, at different points during the shot, and I usually work that out in the blocking phase.
Mm-hmm.
So blocking is very helpful, just to block out the shot and to get the poses in and the rough timings. And then you can go to editorial and kind of open it up if you need to duplicate some of the frames to make it longer, kind of play with it that way.
I see. So the technology sort of lets you, play around with it, even if it's not timed or spaced the way you would like it when you watch it later on. Very cool. So, all right, we have about 1 minute left. So Paul asks, what about parties when you finish a big film? Like, do you guys usually have a lot of fun afterwards?
Yeah, there's usually a wrap party or an animator party or something. There's a screening. Usually I'm waiting for the Paranorman screening. Should be coming up in August. It should be a fun event.
Wow, yeah. Very awesome. Let's see. So, all right, guys. So we are going to wrap up the show. And I want to thank Anthony for stopping by and taking all our questions. And also Randy for presenting one of his films, which is really hilarious. So if you guys want to find out more about Anthony, just go to stopmotionanimation.com. And is it also stopmotionanimation.net, did you say?
AnthonyScott.net.
AnthonyScott.net. Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony.
All right, thanks, guys. This is a lot of fun for me. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to fill an hour, but you guys made it really easy. Thanks for your questions.